I'm Jim Dyer with Fire Barbecue. Today we are going to do beef ribs. Now beef ribs are not that hard to do, but there's some steps you have to take to make sure they turn out juicy and consistent every single time. If you undercook beef ribs, they're going to be tough and not a very pleasurable experience. So let's get going and we'll show you step by step how to do the perfect beef ribs using 1908 Quantum Beef Rub. So let's get going. Alright, so now here you see we have a nice big slab of beef ribs. They're going to be excellent. First thing we got to do when we're prepping these guys is get rid of the skin on the back. Beef rib skin can be tricky to get off. Takes a little work. So you just got to pry underneath and get a little bit of hold of it and just give it a tear. It'll probably come off in 3 or 4 different pieces. It's a little harder to do than your typical pork rib. So yeah, just work away at that, get it all off, otherwise you end up with a plasticky membrane at the end. So when you take a bite, that membrane will stay behind. Easiest way to take this stuff off is just to get a piece of paper towel. It just gives your fingers a little extra grab. So you can grab hold like that and just give her a rip through. And then just work away at it. It might take you 5-10 minutes, but you'll get there in the end. If you can't get through, you can always try digging under with a spoon to get it started. But when you have that paper towel, you see it's not that tricky to do. And just rip it off a little bit at a time, and you're good to go. Then what we're going to do on the other side, I've already started. You'll see on this side it's down to the beef. We're going to cut off any of that little fat that's hanging over the top. We're just going to get rid of it all. We're going to make it all nice and red. So as you get that fat off, you're going to see some silver skin up here. You want to get rid of all that. So we're just going to carve it away, slice by slice, and you see it comes right back down to the beef. You want to do this a little slower because it's really easy to take a lot more than you expect it off. A little bit of fat ain't going to hurt nothing. You'll see actually when you look, this fat kind of comes down, so you're not going to get all this off, but we're going to take as much off as we can without making it a big divot. Beef ribs are inherently fatty anyways, so I mean, you're never going to get it all. So yeah, then we're going to flip back over. I'm going to finish this, and then we'll season it up and get it on the grill. We're going to treat this cut of meat very similar like we would pork ribs. So what we're going to do, we're going to stick it on the grill till it gets to that, 140 to 160 range. Right when that bark's starting to look really nice, the ribs are looking good. Then we're going to bring them inside. We're going to wrap them. Now we're not going to put sugar and stuff on them, but we are going to put just a little butter in there with it. So as that beef sheds its fat and sheds its moisture, it's going to collect in that foil, and it's going to cause a nice moist environment for it to finish cooking. And now here's where it gets tricky. Once we get to the end, anywhere between 204 and let's say 210, it's going to be done. If you're cooking around 225, it's going to be more closer to 204. If you're cooking at 300 and 325 degrees hot and fast, it's going to be closer to 210. So we don't really want to use temperature to tell when it's done. What we want to do is we want to use feel. So the temperature will tell us approximately when we have to start checking the meat. But we're going to take that probe, and we'll show you when we get there. We're going to take that probe, and when it glides in, just like butter, and it's in that 204 to 210 range, that's how you know that meat's done. Because all the muscles, all the tendons are released, they're broken down, all that connective tissue is broken down, all that stuff is just disappeared. So it's just wonderful tender meat. So let's get going and on to the next step. We drum up to 300 degrees. So now what we're going to do, get that lid off there. We're going to throw a couple chunks of wood on there. So I've already got them on there. We're going to throw a couple pieces of chunks of wood right on the coals. Then we're going to put a diffuser plate in now, and this is kind of specific to a drum and a couple other grills. But we want to make sure on a drum that we have that diffuser plate in, just to stop that direct radiant heat, kind of break it up and make it swirl around instead of just having it right on the bottom of that meat, hot and heavy. It's just going to help you not burn it and give you more success. Now a couple things I want to mention on this guy. Because your coals are lit not consistently across the whole space, when every time you come out and check on this piece of meat, you're going to give that rack a turn. Even if you just spin it once or twice, that's fine. And then also halfway through before we wrap, we're going to actually flip this guy over as well, just to make sure we don't get a little too crusty on one side or the other. it's just really good insurance. Now this is a good time that you can stick a probe in there as well. The probe is going to tell you, when you're getting close to those milestones. So when she gets around, 110 degrees, you gotta flip it over, maybe spin the rack a little bit. When it gets to 140, you can wrap it. Even 150, you can wrap it. And then once it's wrapped before 160, because that's when it starts losing the most moisture, then we put it back on and we let it just keep rocking until it gets to that 204 to 210 range, where that probe just glides in just like butter. But we'll get there next. Okay, so that hit an internal temperature of roughly 150. You can see it has a nice bark forming on it, nice exterior. So what we're going to do, we're going to just keep that the way it is. We don't want it to progress any further, but I don't want to lose any more moisture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a gob of butter on there, and I'm going to wrap it and put it back in the grill. You'll notice I'm wrapping it with the bones up. I'm doing that intentionally, just because I don't want to puncture. And it didn't fit that way, so I just shifted it in the foil so I can fold it up properly. Fold it up like a nice little present with a little bit of butter. That's all you got to do, and then we're going to flip around and we're going to turn this back on the grill. We're going to leave it on that grill till it hits about 210 degrees, but like I said, we're looking for that probe to glide in just like butter, and then it's done. And just to touch on that again, what that means is that the fat's rendered, the connective tissue in there is dissolving, and it's just going to be juicy and wonderful. If it doesn't have that, glide in probe, it's just going to be tough and not a pleasurable experience. So next time we see this, it's going to be coming off the grill, and we'll be cutting it up. So let's get her finished. All right, so we pulled those guys off, and you'll see the bones are pulled apart. It looks done. But the way to know is, like I said, to stick that probe in there, and when there's no resistance whatsoever, that's how you know it's finished. This one ended up getting up to like 210 degrees. So temperature isn't always the best way to tell. And the thing with temperature is, if you're cooking at 225, that meat isn't gonna have to get as hot before all that fat renders out. Whereas if you're cooking hot and fast, sometimes it has to get a little hotter for that fat to render out. So if I would have been cooking at 225 on, say, a Traeger or something like that, this would have been, 204, 205, 206. But instead, it was like 210, 211. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of that. So we're just going to let this guy rest for about 10 minutes now that you kind of got the concept of the probe. And just remember, when you stick that probe in there, it's just like butter. So we'll let this guy rest for, minimum of like 15, 20 minutes up to an hour. And we're ready to eat. All right, so here we are. Finished products is rested. You can see it's super juicy. It sucked up some of its juice from that foil wrap, so it really did do its job. Now for cutting these things, I do like to cut from the back side just because you can see where you're at, see what you're doing a little better. And you'll see just a super succulent, tender piece of meat. I'm pretty excited to dig into these ones. Okay, so just a couple closing notes. In regards to the ribs, if you like them a little drier, you don't have to wrap them. Okay, this is my method. There's no wrong way in barbecue. If it works out and it tastes good, you're good to go. But if you want them a little drier, you can definitely leave them out of the wrap, but you're going to get a lot barkier and a lot tougher bark. The other thing with these ribs that is worth noting is that if you're unsure if they're done, let them go a little farther. The reason why I say that, nothing's worse than barbecue that's not cooked enough. Overcooked, it's just a little crumbly, a little fall off the bony, if you will. Everything will just kind of disintegrate, but it's still a good eat. Your family will be totally impressed. You'll still impress all your guests. It's all good. If it's undercooked, it's like, it's par. It's subpar. So those are my two big points. Overcook it if you have to. You don't have to wrap, but it'll make it way juicier. As well, remember, it's not temp based, it is feel. So when that meat feels done with that probe, it's done. You can use temperature to get roughly to that guideline. If you are wrapping, wrap before 160. And I think that rule goes for almost all barbecue for the most part, because that's when it really starts to shed a lot of moisture. So I like to make sure it's wrapped way before then. Yeah, so this is going to be a delicious supper. All the little keynotes from the Quantum here is really going to shine on this guy. It's bold, it stands out, makes for a wonderful, wonderful beef rib. I'm pretty stoked. I've always said this is the best beef rub you can make. Or sorry, this is the best beef rub you can use for beef ribs all day long. So give it a try. Get out to the grill and get things smoking. If you like this video, subscribe, hit like, and leave comments. Why not? And we'll see you again with something else in the near future.